Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My esteemed co-host is Laura Blackwell, and I hope that you're all safe and healthy, happy, or at least surviving and taking care of yourselves and your loved ones. I started Story Hour early days of the pandemic. Laura joined me shortly thereafter, and 3 years ago, actually, we were just talking about this before we fired up the live stream. And my initial intention was just to create a small, cozy community for my writer friends and I to get together and share our work with each other. And it has just gone way beyond that initial scope. We've had, we were talking about this again just before we started, we've had 165 authors through these virtual rooms. And each and every one of them has been exceptional, and they have represented really every corner of speculative fiction house of genres. So it's just been an incredible journey, and it goes on. We received just shortly ago a giver's grant from SIFWA, which allows us to keep the lights on and keep these virtual rooms open. So we can continue to bring you what we feel is some of the best in spoken word speculative fiction. So the way this works is pretty simple, and I like to think of it as kind of one of the oldest forms of human entertainment, which is folks sitting around the fire telling each other lies. So at Story Hour, this is exactly what we do. We've got two authors, about 30 minutes each, sharing their work. And tonight, we're extremely happy to have two repeat guests, Tobi Ogundiran and L. Marie Wood. So it's our custom to ask authors to indicate a worthy cause for us to call your attention to. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to help financially to do that, otherwise, just to be aware that these folks are out there doing good work. And if you're so inclined, perhaps you can share the word. So L. Marie is reading tonight for some.org, and that is an acronym for So That Others Might Eat. Since 1970, SOME has been a care provider and a beacon of hope to residents in our nation's capital. Their services are available to individuals, families, senior citizens, veterans, and anybody affected by physical or mental illness. So every day, SOME works to break the cycle of poverty and homelessness through a comprehensive approach. And the services that they provide include housing, healthcare, advocacy, and education. So that's SOME, some.org. Tobi Ogundiran is reading tonight for chessinslumsafrica.com. Chess in Slums believes every child deserves an equal opportunity in attaining a better life. And this belief is what led chessinslumsafrica.com to adopt an innovative approach where they use chess to empower kids from impoverished backgrounds to learn academic, educational, and critical thinking skills that will help them secure a better life. Their ultimate goal is to train over 1 million kids in the space of 5 years. Chess in Slums Africa, that's www.chessinslumsafrica.com. So be aware of those, check them out, contribute if you can. If you can't, just spread the word. We're going to start the program tonight with L. Marie Wood. L. Marie is an award-winning dark fiction author, screenwriter, and poet with novels in the psychological horror, mystery, and dark romance genres. She won the Golden Stake Award for her novel, The Promise Keeper. She's a recipient of the MICO and Miko Award, has won Best Horror, Best Action, Best Afrofuturism, Horror, Sci-Fi, and Best Short Screenplay Awards in both national and international film festivals. Wood, a Brave New Weird nominated author, has penned short fiction that has been published in groundbreaking works, including the Bram Stoker Award finalist anthology Sycorax's Daughters and Slay Stories of the Vampire Noir. She's also part of the 2022 BookFest Book Award-winning poetry anthology Under Her Skin. Wood is also the founder of the Speculative Fiction Academy, an English and creative writing professor, and a horror scholar. So you can learn more about L. Marie Wood at www.lmariewood.com. So, Marie, welcome and take it away.
That was pretty cool. Shucks. Thank you. Good night. Anyway, all of that stuff just really means that I love writing. I love words, and I love, just coming up with ideas. So thanks for reading that. That's pretty cool. I don't think I've heard that one read out loud, and The Brave New Weird was a pretty cool thing. That was very exciting. So anyway, without further ado, I'll talk about the story I'm reading tonight, which is called Sunday Morning. It's actually, today's a really cool day because tomorrow's the book birthday for the book that this is going to be in. And yeah, right, very cool. And I was pretty quiet about it purely because, I have, the past 2 years, I have bumped into so many different dates and shifts and reasons for things not coming out that I waited until I was 100% certain this is going to be tomorrow. So Sunday Morning is part of the collection called The Tales of Time, which is like a companion book to the novella, The Open Book. So what we're saying, obviously, is that something is really happening in the open book and it's terrorizing everybody. And if you're tough enough, you'll find out what it is. That you have to read The Tales of Time to do that. So it's really kind of fun and I'm excited about it. But this story, I really had a great time writing because it's so, well, I don't want to give it away. I'll just read it. You'll see. But it's creepy. So again, without further ado, let's go. He stood on the steps, listening to the choir lift their voices, a last-minute practice before the morning's service. He wished he could plug his ears, blot out the sound with his screams, something. He didn't want to hear them thanking God for their lot in life, for the streets that stank like piss and vomit, for the bread and milk the government let them have for free. He didn't want to open those heavy doors and feel the oppressive heat greet him. It was cooler outside. He didn't want to smell the foyer, its odd mixture of incense, sweat, and sulfur, ever present. He couldn't bring himself to bow his head in supplication again. He didn't feel anything when he did anyway. Just the hot, sticky sweat that coated his neck, cooling in the air that had been whipped up by the dirty fan propped in the window. But he had to. Just as sure as he knew his own name, he knew he had to enter that place, hear those sounds, and smell those smells again. The thick, glossy tenement paint that caked the walls had his name etched in it. The hymns that the choir wailed incessantly spoke to him, this time, every time. At least that's what it felt like. He was afraid of what would happen if he didn't respond to their deafening call. He opened the doors to the church, big hulking things made of dark wood with antique gold trim, and slipped inside. He didn't want to make a sound, didn't want to draw attention to himself. He just wanted to do what he had to do and leave. He might never come back if he could get away clean. Where you been, Caleb? You know he's been looking for you. The sound of the old woman's voice startled him. She was there, sitting on her perch like she always was, her Sunday outfit covered by a thick black shroud with her head bowed as if in prayer. A stack of fans advertising Bedman's funerary services sat on her lap, waiting to be handed to the parishioners that would fill the sanctuary soon. Everything was the same as it always was inside the church, where he had begged for forgiveness all those years ago, his knees bruised and bleeding. This Sunday morning was the same as every Sunday morning, yet the scene frightened Caleb to the core. The old woman didn't look up when she spoke. He passed by her without responding. There was nothing to say anyway. He had been gone for too long. The cognac cap toe lace-ups had been polished to a perfect shine. The gray slacks he wore touched the top of his shoes, fitting the pastor the way only tailor-made clothing could. His robe, pressed crisply, fell mid-shin. He was smoothing it when Caleb entered the room. As the pastor took off the onyx ring that sat majestically on his right pinky, Caleb spoke. "Hello, Pastor." "There you are," the pastor said in a rich baritone. There wasn't happiness in his voice, but not anger either. Frustration, perhaps. Caleb had been gone for longer than anticipated. He had almost caused a delay in the festivities. Caleb closed the door behind him, knowing that was what was expected of him. He tried to remain quiet and still, wanting to say nothing under his gaze, but his will was weak. It would take a much longer absence for Caleb to escape the pastor's control. The pastor waited in silence. His will was far stronger than Caleb's could ever hope to be. An explanation was expected, and Caleb knew he had better give one or suffer the consequences. "They've taken to the streets again," Caleb started, trying to buy time. He glanced out of the window and saw the first of the congregation making their way to the weathered doors of the church. Sister Clara and her niece, Magnolia, were early, and Caleb had an idea why. He didn't have much time. St. Augustine Baptist is out there with their pastor sitting on a throne, hoisted up on their shoulders, Caleb continued, trying to act normal, even as he spied more people heading to the church doors, snatching glances at the upstairs window as they did. Brother Charles made eye contact with Caleb and nodded. Caleb wasn't sure if he nodded in kind or not. "They're carrying him around and singing hymns up and down Fifth." "Is that so?" The pastor groomed, his mustache in the mirror, pulling his lips into a frown as the little comb tugged at the coarse hair. "People are paying attention." Caleb didn't know why he said it. He shouldn't have. If he wanted to get out of there unscathed, he shouldn't have. But it was out, and Pastor heard it. He turned around with eyes ablaze. "They can look all they want, can't they? Stick their heads out the window and watch the parade go by, but we know what we have here. We know where the true message of salvation lies, don't we, Caleb?" Caleb could already feel the pastor's cold, clammy hand on his arm, and he shivered. He didn't think he could bear the man touching him, not another time, but he had to. If he wanted to make it out of that room, he had to. The pastor's hand stopped in midair. His eyes trained on Caleb's face. He studied the younger man, letting his gaze course over Caleb's nervous, darting eyes and sallow skin, animated by trembling muscles. After what seemed like 5 minutes, he dropped his hand, busying it with something else, dusting his robe, slicking his hair back, and Caleb didn't know. What the pastor did with his hands after the fact didn't matter. The smile that played at the corners of the pastor's mouth did. Caleb began to pant, open-mouthed and shamefully. The pastor walked away from Caleb and toward a desk that took up most of the small room. In an amused voice that belied a secret that Caleb would never know, he asked, "Why you been gone so long, boy?" Caleb's mouth felt dry. He couldn't peel his tongue from the roof of it. I had to go uptown to get what you needed." "Is that so?" the pastor asked, his back turned to Caleb now as he fingered the hymnal on his desk. "And did you get what I needed? Because, I need it for today, right now, in fact." "I didn't, Pastor. See, that's the thing," Caleb started. He knew the fidgeting and fast talking he had started up was going to make everything worse, but he couldn't stop himself. They didn't want to give it to me, he continued. They told me you would have to get it yourself this time or they can't help us no more. Caleb inched towards the door as he spoke, focusing on it, thinking he might have to make a break for it before long. The pastor did not like to be disappointed. Didn't give it to you, they say. Huh. The pastor's voice seemed like it was coming from all around him. Caleb turned his head toward the desk where he had been standing, but didn't see him there. He turned left and right, but didn't see him in either place. An involuntary gasp escaped his lips as the realization that the pastor was nowhere to be seen hit home. He decided that if he ever had a chance of getting away, it was then, right then. Caleb turned to the door and grabbed the handle. It was hot to the touch. Hissing in pain, he threw the door open and ran down the hall, barreling past the old woman so quickly he didn't notice that she was slumped over on her side at an unnatural angle, the fans that sat in her lap pooling around her feet like water. Caleb ripped open the church doors, pulling them with such strength he almost ripped them off their hinges. He was almost out. He could feel the fresh air on his face, could smell the fragrance of the city, hot dogs, motor oil, and cigarettes all rolled up into one. He could be free if he could just take one more step. Caleb put one foot onto the church steps that led to the door in triumph and cast a glance over his shoulder. The pastor stood before the amassing congregation, smiling with teeth that were unnaturally white. He carried on conversations and shook hands, all the while his eyes focused on Caleb. His smile turned Caleb's blood cold. Caleb left the church feeling numb. He stumbled down the stairs, bumping into people on their way up, grabbing onto them for balance. What's the matter with you, boy? You're going the wrong way. People pulled at him from all directions, trying to redirect his steps. No, Caleb exclaimed weakly, fighting to move away from the church steps and out into the world, the free world, where no one knew his name, where no one wanted anything from him. You know what I need, Caleb. The pastor's voice sounded inside his head. Caleb slapped his hands over his ears and howled in the morning light. He felt his legs give way, the concrete biting into the scars on his knees, splitting open skin that had long since healed from the last time he acquiesced under the weight of the pastor's gaze. His chest heaved with exertion as he screamed over and over and over again. When his breath finally gave out and he lay gasping on the ground, he lifted his head and looked toward the church doors, knowing he had to see, but afraid of what he might find. The splintered wood seemed to jut out at him like daggers. The antique gold that had once outlined a latticework of symbols adorning the door had melted into a ruddy stream, donning an ancient patina the color of dried blood. And the congregation stared at him in expectation. Thank you for letting me read that to you tonight.
That was deliciously creepy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See, that's what I mean. It was so creepy. I was creeped out writing it.
That's the best kind, man. Oh, man. L. Marie Wood, folks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As many of you know, that between authors, we just sit still for a moment, let the work resonate ring, let our cells resonate and ring, and sort of regroup for the next author. So we're going to do that. Just join me in taking a couple of deep breaths and shifting gear. All right. Thank you so much, Elmarie. Tobi Ogundiran is the author of Jackal Jackal, Tales of the Dark and Fantastic, out this July from Undertow Publications. Many of Tobi's stories have appeared in journals such as Lightspeed, FNSF, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and in several Year's Best anthologies, including the Year's Best Fantasy and the Year's Best African Speculative Fiction. His work's been shortlisted for the NAMOS, British Science Fiction Association, Shirley Jackson, and Ignite Awards. He lives and works in Oxford, Mississippi. You can find him at tobiogundiran.com and at Tobi_the Dreamer on Twitter, for as long as we all have Twitter. Tobi first appeared Story Hour in April 22. Tobi, the floor is yours. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. And Elmarie, your story was absolutely deliciously creepy. All right. So this story I'm going to read is titled "The Clockmaker and His Daughter." It's originally appeared in Lightspeed in August of last year. It's also going to be in my collection, which is out from Undertow Publications in July. Here's a wonderful cover.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So this story came about when I was doom scrolling through Twitter, as one does, and I stumbled upon this absolutely riveting piece of art. It looked like a giant was sitting smack in the middle of a city. He had a car in his hand, and it was titled, the paint was titled "The Creator." So you could imagine the giant was sort of the creator of this miniature city. And that's got my creative juices flowing, I guess. Okay. The Clockmaker and His Daughter. Gaza looked down at the city of Nis, surveying his creation. He thought it was perfect. Well, almost. In the city center stood several griots, spinning a tale to a captive audience, their camels and brightly colored caravans sheltering in the shade of palm trees. The griots should be dusty. After all, they had traveled some distance, spent several months weathering the harsh terrain of the deserts. As it was, they looked too pristine, glistening as they were with fresh coats of paint. So, Gaza plucked his brush, dipped it into a bowl of dust, and worked some dirt into their wooden grains until each griot looked appropriately aged and travel-worn. After a moment's thought, Gaza moved a young boy from the steps of the library and placed him in the audience. There. Now it was perfect. "Daughter," Gaza called. "Come." The door swung open. Gaza pushed back his dismay at the sight of her. He would never get used to seeing his daughter this way, the stone-like scales eating her skin until the healthy brown flesh was nearly overtaken. The sickness had taken half her body, and her entire left leg was all carapace, so that it was useless and snagged on the floor whenever she walked, making a sound like a rolling boulder. If it ever reached her heart. He shook the thoughts from his head. Ufa leaned against her walking stick, the weariness stuck in how she carried herself, in the way her shifts clung to her frail form. But as she took in the city, sprawled on the floor of what used to be their bedroom, the light came back into her eyes. "Papa," she said, you built Nis. Do you like it, Ufichka?" "I love it," she cried, quivering with excitement. "I can see Yonju's bakery, and here, the bathing pools, and the square of the dancing maiden, Papa." She turned and hugged him tight, and he held her in that careful way he had come to learn, for fear of causing her pain. Ufa loved to roam the city, but ever since the stone sickness took her, her strength had dwindled until walking became exceedingly painful and running around the city impossible. At first, whenever Gaza could pry himself from work, He would put Ufa into his cart to push her all over the city, but even that soon became too unbearable for her. So he spent the past 2 months cutting wood to construct this replica, painting and sanding and refining each clockwork figurine until they moved with grace. This Nis was not quite as big as the real thing, of course, but it was big enough for one with a mind like hers. So imagine that she was truly there to lose herself in the miniature streets. Seeing her eyes light up, seeing how much she appreciated it, that was everything. She peeled away from him, looking at the city in silent wonderment. There are people. You made people, but she frowned. It is a little different, Papa. This building, this is where the university is. This is the niece of my youth, of before, said Gaza. Of before. Before the coming of the Anuki and the conquest of Nis. Now his beloved city was marred with the mark of foreign occupation. Hard utilitarian structures sprouted up at every corner. The hideous effigies of their sun god Yahweh defaced the faces of sleek Nisini architecture. The Anuki were slowly eating the city, as surely as they had eaten its peoples. It was the city of his youth, but it was also the nest of his dreams. At the very end of the Street of Light stood a 2-story brick structure he could never afford, with large glass windows and rustic shale roofing, and a drain pipe that ran down the leeward side, curving like an elephant's trunk. A sign embossed in gold lettering ran over the glass windows, and it read, Master Gaza's Emporium of Clocks, Chronographs, and other assorted timepieces. Here, he said, let me show you something. He reached for the drain pipe, wound it until it was taut. Then he released it. The city sprang into life. Dirigibles sailed overhead, palm trees waved in a non-existent breeze, the houses lit up with the warm glow of electricity, and clockwork Nisini went about their business. Here, a mother tugged her 2 boys to the temple of light. Here, some acolytes of Fawn gave alms to the poor. It is alive, breathed Ufa, lights dancing in her eyes. Gaza looked at it again, feeling his heart swell with joy. If he tried, he could almost imagine he couldn't hear the faint tick of gears as they turned, and he couldn't see the near invisible cables that held the dirigibles aloft. If he closed his eyes, he could imagine that yes, truly, the city was alive. The air was thick with the smells of the market as Gaza made his way down the street. Coriander and black pepper and curry and paprika. He saw 1 or 2 Anuki soldiers looking like fire ants in their red armor as they clanked past. But there were less Anuki here than there were in other parts of the city. Their constitution couldn't handle the spiced market air, which burned their throats and brought tears to their eyes. Although dusk had fallen, the air boiled as the streets and buildings gave off heat trapped from a full day of sun, and Gaza found his clothes sticking to his back. Once or twice, he ducked as an airship flew past, dirigible engines chugging. The invaders sometimes monitored them, peering down in their long scopes, looking for suspicious gatherings or signs of uprising. Not that there had been one in over 30 years. The Nisini were thoroughly conquered and perfectly docile. A bell announced Gaza's presence as he stepped into the apothecary's. Leila was a small, severe woman, wrapped in shawls even in the sweltering heat. She didn't look up, didn't even acknowledge him, but stood pouring a purple liquid into a decanter. Gaza stood politely while she worked, enduring the stink of medicine and herbs and old sweat. Leila held up the decanter to the lights, then placed it carefully on the counter before turning to glower at Gaza. Yes, I need medicine, he said. Well, I know, imagine you come here for bread or face pain for your beloved. What? She waved an impatient hand. Which kind medicine you be wanting? Gaza licked his lips, glanced over his shoulder at the dusty shop windows darkened with night, and said, Asha's tears. Her eyes went round. You're mad? No? Asha's tears, the tear-shaped fruits that hung from the tree in the middle of the palace, the reason the Anuki had invaded in the first place. Some said that Asha, the first queen of Nis, upon hearing of the death of her only son, broke down and wept, and from where her tears fell, sprouted a tree. Others said her pain had been so unbearable that she transmogrified into a many-limbed tree, tall and white with salty sweet fruit. Gaza remembered seeing it as a boy, where it grew in what used to be the city center, watching pilgrims come from every corner of the country to worship at its roots. It was believed to have healing powers, and indeed it did, but not one Messini who ate of its fruits ever took ill. Sickness had been a concept as foreign as the Anuki, and over the years, people tried to regrow the tree, planting its seeds in other parts of the country, but it never took. There was only the one tree in the very center of the empire with its bountiful fruit. It didn't take long until word spread and the Anuki turned their covetous eye on it. If Asha's tears could heal any disease, they reasoned, then it could stay the dark hand of death and prolong the life of their wretched emperor. But what was death but the succumbing of the flesh to the disease of time? And so they came and built their hideous palace around it and claimed the tree for themselves. You won't get me killed, eh? Said Layla, talking about Asha's tears. Get out my bloody shop. I will pay you, he said, clinging to the counter. Are you deaf or what? The tree belonged to the Anuki now, where behind the palace's ivory gates, alchemists worked day and night trying to create a life elixir from its juices. Some made its way to the black market, to apothecaries like Layla, the rotted ones, the gnarled ones. But Gaza was desperate. He would take even a dried husk if there was a chance of saving his daughter. It's not for me. He was of a dying generation of Messini, of which there were a scant few, who had tasted Asha's tears in the pre-war days and could not fall ill. It is my daughter. She has... He took a deep breath. Please, she is in pain. I don't want her to die. Perhaps it was a desperation in his voice. Perhaps it was a knowledge of his daughter's ailment. But Layla's scowl softened somewhat. What she have, your daughter? I can make ointments, tinctures. What poor healers they made, when for generations they had not had the need to learn medicine. Now disease ate through them like wildfire, and the Anuki responded in the only language they knew, banishing the sick to the desert, and in the case of the highly contagious, those with stone sickness, they burned. Gaza shook his head, tears leaking from his eyes. You cannot help her. And in that moment, understanding passed between the two of them. Layla sighed. How old is your daughter? She's seen 12 full seasons, said Gaza, and Asha grants that she sees her 13th. It's not right, muttered the apothecary. One so young shouldn't have to suffer so much. Gaza looked at her hopefully. You will help us then, and without waiting for an answer, reached into his pocket. Here, said Gaza hastily, placing a cloth-wrapped package on the counter. He unwrapped it to reveal a clock. This is all I have, my most expensive piece. Take it. Through rheumy eyes, Layla squinted at the clock. It was a beautiful piece, the finest work of his craftsmanship. He had made it when Ufa was born and had been saving it for her dowry. But right now, he needed her to leave. He could always make another. A long moment passed in which Layla stared at the piece, in which Gaza prayed silently that she would agree to help him. Then, she placed a proprietary hand on the clock, sliding it towards herself. Come tomorrow then, 13th bell. Thank you, said Gaza, bowing repeatedly. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Gaza left the shop, considerably light of heart. It felt as though a great weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Hope! How he hadn't dared to hope. And now, The dark fog that had wrapped itself around him with each passing day was not quite gone, but he could see through it now. Just the bites of Asha's tears, and his Ufa will be made whole again. Ufichka, he called as he stepped into the house. Good news. He found her sprawled face down on the threshold between the living room and dining room. Gaza's mind went black with panic as he rushed over to her. It was too late. He had dawdled too long, and now, a feeble cry as he turned her over. The stone sickness had nearly consumed her face. The previously smooth brown skin was now hard as wood, lined with fissures like water-starved earth. What happened? He asked, his heart thrashing in his chest. Sorry, Papa, groaned Ufa. I was trying to reach the city. You shouldn't move when I'm not around. I told you that. He carried her gently and set her on the chair. I thought, you said you had good news. Yes, I've been able to purchase Asha's tears for you. Really? She brightened. How? Can we afford it? What if they are not? Don't you worry yourself, Ufichka, said Gaza, smoothing her hair. All that's important is that by this time tomorrow, you'll be whole again. They had a satisfying dinner of moldy bread and curdled jam, but they were in such high spirits that even the bread tasted sweet. It pleased him to see Ufa eat so ravenously. Later, he carried her to the bedroom, to the miniature nest where they sat, two giants at the edge of the city. We are wrong, Papa, said Ufa. Gaza frowned. Wrong? What about? Asha's tears. It's not a healing tree. I heard it from the griots a long time ago. She touched her hand to the griots near their caravans, who were frozen before their small audience. It looked like a moment captured by the deft hand of a sculptor, as if by the breath of wind they might resume their lives, griot and audience alike, enraptured with wondrous tales of an age-long past. Okay, and what did you hear? It is a wishing tree, Papa. You make a wish as you eat the fruit, and it becomes true. But our ancestors were so ravaged by diseases, and all they wanted was to heal themselves and be free from sickness. So whenever they ate it, they wished for good health, until the fruits did only that, healed. Asha's tears is like a clay which bends to the will of the potter. If what they say is true, then the Anuki emperor would have wished immortality for himself. But they don't know. She looked up at him. We don't know. Our ancestors forgot. I see, he said. Then, gently, Ufichka, there is a reason no one listens to the grills anymore. Memory is fallible. Humans doubly so. You see, tales often morph in the retelling until you can scarcely tell truth from embellishment. It is better to trust in the written word. But people can lie, can't they? She asked, turning to look at him. They can easily write lies in books too. True, said Gaza slowly. So, what's the difference? One way or the other, we're beholden to those who tell us things, she shrugged. We choose what we believe. Hi, you this girl. When did you get so smart, eh? She beamed up at him, her grin stiff and lopsided. When you were sleeping, old man. Gaza knew something was wrong even before he arrived at Leila's shop. It was in the way the streets were nearly empty, devoid of the usual press of roiling bodies. It was in the dark looks that were darted his way as what stragglers remained hurried off. When he arrived in front of the lopsided shop, he found the door shut, the windows dark. Hello, he called, knocking on the door, but there was no reply. He pressed his face to the dusty windows and was confronted with an impenetrable darkness. There was no one in the shop. Gaza stood for a long moment, staring at nothing in particular. She had tricked him. The woman had collected his payment with no intention of holding up her end of the bargain, but that wasn't right. He wasn't some street peddler with no fixed spot he would never be able to find. She had a shop, and he knew how costly those were to rent in a nookie nest, so she wouldn't abandon it all for some clock. although it was an expensive piece. Someone clutched at him. Gaza turned to find a filthy man hanging on his sleeve, the other hand proffering a rusted collection cup, which he rattled in Gaza's face. Alms for the poor. Gaza pried himself free of his grip. Sorry, I have no. Do you know where the woman went? He asked, pointing over his shoulder at the shop. The apothecary. The man turned his jaundiced eyes to the shop, then back at Gaza. Slowly, he thrust out his collection cup. Fine. Gaza rooted in his pockets and came up with a few bits of nickel, which he deposited into the cup. Well, said Gaza impatiently, where is she? Ants, croaked the beggar. Fire ants. Gaza's blood turned cold. The man was talking about Anuki soldiers in their red armor. They took her? He asked, hoping, praying that that was what it was and not what he was beginning to suspect. Nah, she took them. By the light, he breathed, shaking his head as he stepped backwards. No, no, no. And then he was running, flying down the street, willing his old bones to move faster, his mind skittered. If he could get there before them, he would grab Ufa and flee the city, go somewhere they would never be found, if need be to the farthest reaches of the empire where Anuki influence was virtually non-existent. Gaza couldn't have said how he crossed half the city, but he soon found himself on his street, his home. Gaza gave a strangled cry at the sight of the door hanging by its hinges. He had been hoping he was wrong, that Layla hadn't led the soldiers to his house. However, she knew how to find him, but that had been a fool's hope. Then came the voices, raised voices, angry voices, and rising above them, Ufa's voice, screaming for him. He burst into the house. Two soldiers turned as one in his direction. They looked a menace in their armor, the room too small for them, the swords and batons silently promising violence. But in that moment, Gaza found that he did not fear them, did not fear for himself. There was only Ufa on his mind. Where is my daughter? He demanded. Two more soldiers emerged from the bedroom, Ufa hanging between them like a sack of stones, screaming in pain. A blind madness overcame Gaza. That is my daughter, he yelled, dashing towards them. Get away from... Oof. The soldier nearest him drove a gauntleted fist into his belly, cutting short his advance and folding him in half. Gaza dropped wheezing to his knees, clutching his belly. Papa! Ufa. Papa, help me! Tears streamed down her cheeks, splattering to the floor. He could see the terror in her eyes. Leave her be, he gasped. Please, can't you see you're hurting her? But they paid him no mind, were already stepping over him as though he did not exist, heading for the door. Gaza scrambled to his feet, still gasping for air, and moved to block the door. No, he said, you will not take her. The soldiers looked mildly irritated, almost bored, as though they had only come out to take out the trash and found a territorial rodent, as though it were not his daughter they were taking to her death. A soldier stepped forward, gently unhooking his club. Step aside, he said softly. I won't ask again. You will have to go through me. The soldier was fast. One moment, Gaza stood at the threshold, clutching the posts. The next, he was flying through the air, flipping head over heels. Lights exploded in his vision as he cracked his head against the wall, then sank onto the table. It came down in a chaos of splinters and broken crockery and food from the half-eaten lunch. The room swam. Darkness seeped into the edges of Gaza's vision, but he shook his head, shook the ringing from his ears as he wrenched himself from the wreck and started to crawl towards the now emptying door and the rapidly receding screams of his daughter. Gaza gave a great hoot of pain as a boot crushed his hand. He looked up to see the soldier, dead, passionless eyes staring at him as he ground the small bones of Gaza's fingers. And then he swung the other boot, cracking it across Gaza's jaw. The world went black. The long shadows of dusk were stretching across the room when Gaza came to. His jaw was swollen shut, and every inch of his body was alight in pain. It felt as though he had been dragged through the streets or trampled beneath a great herd of enraged elephants. At first, he sat there in darkness, trying to fit together the jumbled pieces of his mind. Then it all came flooding back. Ufa, he cried. How long had he been out? A long while by the looks of it. They would have taken her to the palace, and he burst into tears. It was too late. He had failed his daughter. Gaza couldn't say how he found himself on the streets, but he limped along, clutching his side. He thought of going to the palace gates, of raising a ruckus, demanding that they give him his daughter. But he was too much of a coward for that. He realized that he did not want to die, and he hated himself for it. What did it say about him that he clung on to a life that was no longer worth living? For what would life be without Ufa, without his dear Ufishka? It wasn't until he stood outside the dusty windows that he realized where his feet had carried him. Gaza pushed open the door and stepped into the dank shop. Leila was in the middle of preparing a tincture. She started to snarl at whoever had intruded when she saw him. A look of shame passed across her papery features. Why? Said Gaza, limping towards her. You're one of us. Why would you side with them? Why would you let them take her? She was in pain, she mumbled. One so young shouldn't have to suffer too much. That's why I came to you, to cure her. I don't understand why you couldn't just... Something clicked into place in his mind. How much? He asked. Leila looked away, looked down at her hands, which she had folded neatly on the counter. How much did my daughter's life cost? 30 pieces, she said, still not meeting his eyes. 30 pieces of silver. Gaza burst into laughter, a long, hyena-like cackle that belonged to the wild. Pain spasmed through his jaw as he laughed, but he couldn't help himself. 30 pieces, he choked, wiping tears from his eyes. Leila reached into the folds of her skirt and produced a fat, brown pouch, tinkling with coins. Take it. Gaza was overcome by fresh gales of laughter. He didn't know which was worse, that his daughter had been priced for such a meager sum, or that the woman was trying to give it to him. No, he growled. I will not absolve you. You will think of her when you spend that money. You will know that you condemned the child to die. He turned to leave. There is no more Asha's tears, Leila said as he pushed open the door. Has not been many seasons. Alchemists took too much. The tree died. Gaza stumbled out of the shop, numb with shock, with pain, with despair. Of course, there were no more tears. Of course, it took too much. That was all they were good for. They took and took until there was nothing left. They had taken the prosperity of Nis, and now they had taken his daughter from him. It was dark by the time Gaza found his way back home. The door still hung by its broken hinge, clacking as it swung in the breeze. The room was still in disarray, signs of struggle everywhere. He leaned towards the bedroom where he found the miniature city in ruin. Buildings trampled, people lying crushed, mechanical innards spilling out. In some of the buildings, the lights flickered on and off, as if trying to wrest some semblance of order amid all the chaos. It looked like the aftermath of war, like the aftermath of the conquest of Nis. Gaza returned to the living room, then stopped dead in his tracks. In the middle of the room stood a plant, a single white shoot which barely reached his chest, but a plant nonetheless, and at the end of the slender stalk hung a single tear-shaped fruit. What in the world? He breathed, limping slowly towards the plant. He had missed it when he passed, but his eyes were now adjusted to the dark, and there was no denying what he was seeing. Gaza dropped to his knees. It made no sense. Hadn't people tried over millennia to regrow the tree? Hadn't they failed? And yet, here it was in his living room, sprouting from the floorboards. Around the young roots, he could see dark, wet marks as though the floorboard had been soaked by water or tears. And from where her tears fell, sprouted the tree. Ufa, he breathed as he plucked the fruit. It was warm and soft in his palm, and as he sat there in the dark, turning the golden fruit in his hands, Ufa's voice came loud and clear to him. It is a wishing tree, Papa. You make a wish as you eat the fruit, and it becomes true. With trembling hands, Gaza brought the fruit to his mouth and bit into it. Then he made a wish. The end.
Oh, man. Wow. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Speechless. Thank you, Toby. It's a beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Listening.
Boy, what a privilege this is. Another great story hour. Two wonderful authors, Elmarie Wood, Tobi Ogundiran. Two great stories. Man. Well, until next week, be good to each other. We'll see you then. And next week we'll have L.S. Johnson and Karen Hoyler. I want to thank our authors again, Elmarie Wood, Tobi Ogundiran, and of course, my fabulous co-host, Laura Blackwell. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. See you next time.